Welcome back to the Rashi Nosh. I'm Pastor Matt.
And I'm Kara.
This week, our Torah portion is Lech Lecha. This is the famous passage that starts in Genesis 12, where Abraham is told by God to leave his country and his father's household and to go to a land that God will show him. And this is a wonderful book that I got before my trip a few months ago when I was going to Rashi's hometown in France. And it's a wonderful book because it's called the JPS Rashi Discussion Torah Commentary. And it's husband and wife, Stephen and Sarah Levy. And what's really cool about this is it not only gives you what Rashi says about the certain Torah portion, but it gives some questions for discussion. And it deals in every Torah portion, it has a couple of different sections to it, a couple of different subjects to discuss. So I thought this would be fun to go through because they're a husband and wife, we're a husband and wife, and we can discuss some of these things. So let me just read to you. What's really cool about this as well is it gives some cultural background in the modern world that is in regard to the Torah portion. So because this is about going and entering a new land, it compares that to, at least in our country, in the United States, the immigrant experience. And I think all countries have immigrants. But let me just read this to us, and then we'll discuss what Rashi says. So in the United States, where most citizens trace their roots to another country, there is nothing unusual about being descended from immigrants. However, most countries are populated by ethnic natives who have no collective memory of having lived anywhere else. As a people, Jews are largely unique and almost always tracing their lineage to a foreign land. I mean, after all, it wasn't until 1948 that they had their own country again. So they're all from somewhere else if you live in Israel today. In fact, Jewish history opens with perhaps the world's first recorded immigrant experience, the journey of Abram, or Avram, the first Jew from his native land to Israel. God's directive to Abram, whose name was later changed to Abraham, to immigrate to Israel is recorded in the opening verse of Parasha Lech Lecha. The Lord said to Abram, "Go forth from your native land and from your father's house to the land that I will show you." This is in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1. Now, what's interesting, what Rashi says is, the word lech means go. And if you're to look in the Torah portion, it's a repeated thing, lech lecha. It's like go, go. But what Rashi says is when these words are repeated, it literally means, lech lecha means go for yourself, go for your own good. And it is similar to the Torah portion called shalach, sometimes known as shalach lecha, go for yourself or send for yourself out spies or scouts to the promised land. It was like for your own good. So go for your own benefit and for your own good, and I will make you a great nation. But here you will not merit having children where they were then. Moreover, I will make your character known in the world. Now, what's interesting is, as Jewish people came to this country, to the United States, in Yiddish, they actually called America the Golden Country. It was like a land of opportunity. So there's some interesting discussion questions that the Levies have for us, and I wanted to ask you about this, if you know about it. I think probably my family knows more than yours about this kind of thing, but do you know your family's background and what experience they had of settling in America? Do you know anything about that?
I really don't. I think a little bit from both sides of my family came from England, but that's about all I know.
Okay. A good portion of my, years ago, when my grandmother was still alive, who died at over 100, she was adopted. And so we wanted to sort of help her find out who she was. And so we got those DNA tests, everyone in my particular little nuclear family got those along with my grandmother. And so we found out that we knew that we had most recently come from Ireland, like in the early 1900s. And you actually found my family at Ellis Island on a trip that you went on to New York. And you discovered that there was actually a baby sister to my great grandfather that we never heard of. And so she must have died, which is a sad thought. But since she was never remembered in the family, she must have passed as an infant. So yeah, in my family, all we knew is, we came from Ireland, from Belfast in the 1900s, early 1900s. But then before that, a few hundred years before that, we were in Scotland. So, Scotland and Ireland, and I have some England in there as well. Obviously, your family and my family felt that the United States was a better situation. Otherwise, they wouldn't have come. And both of us, on at least one side of our family, we've been in this country even longer. I think you even go back to like the founding. Part of your family goes back to even the founding of our country. And in one area of my family, we do as well. So for some reason, like the Jewish people that came here, people from the nations came from all over and ended up here in the United States. So they were coming, these Jewish people that were coming to America looked at it as a golden country. What would that mean to you if for some reason we felt the need to move somewhere else, to uproot our family and to move somewhere else? Can you think of anything that would be really attractive to you? What would be like a golden country? What might be different than here?
I don't know.
I know most recently we were a little further north and we were enjoying the autumn leaves and things like that. Is that an attractive thing to you now that you've seen the change of seasons? Is that?
It is pretty. I will give you that.
Do you think you'd like to live somewhere where it would snow as well? Or is the changing of the leaves and the temperature a little bit good enough?
Yeah, I think I'm too much of a Florida girl for that.
And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with being a Florida girl. So it is interesting that where we live in the United States in Florida, I think a lot of people look at us as the golden country. We're near the ocean. We have the beach here. It's interesting. Something else that Rashi brings up as we turn the page here, another just topic of discussion that I'd like us to have, and that is the idea of ladies first. At least in our country, that is part of a history of politeness, I think, of letting ladies go first. And we both come from pretty traditional families. I was always raised as a male to, if I was walking up to a building and there was a lady there as well, I was brought up, and I still do it to this day, to let the woman go in the building first. And I was even taught to open the door for her, to do that, to let ladies go first. So what does Rashi mean by ladies first? Let's look at this. So it says in Genesis 12:8, from there he moved on to the hill country east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And he built there an altar to the Lord and invoked the Lord by name. Now Rashi comments on the word ohalo. The word ohel means tent. So ohalo means his tent, which is pronounced consistent with its usual spelling, as if the last letter were the letter vav in Hebrew, the masculine possessive suffix meaning his tent. Now, what's interesting is we translate this into English, since it's talking about Abraham, or Abram at this time, and it says that he pitched the tent. We translate it into English as his tent. So this is talking about him. However, in the Hebrew, it doesn't end with a vav, making it masculine. It ends with the letter he, which is the feminine possessive suffix, meaning her tent. So what does this mean? Rashi says that although this word is translated into English as his tent, it really can be read, because of its spelling, the unusual spelling here, her tent, that he pitched her tent. And Rashi says that this means that first he pitched his wife's tent and then his. In other words, like ladies first. So the Talmud advises that a man should honor his wife more than himself. I think that is consistent with even what we read in the New Testament. Put others' needs before our own. But this comes from Sanhedrin 76b in the Babylonian Talmud. So Abraham's pitching of his wife's tent before his own is an expression of this value of a man honoring his wife more than himself. So, as a woman, I've never been a woman, never will be a woman, but as a woman, how have you felt have you witnessed this? I mean, besides in our own family, have you been on the receiving end of a ladies first mentality? And how does that make you feel? I know a lot of modern women, especially with regard to like feminism, are like, don't open the door for me, I can do it myself. Do you find that old fashioned, or does it feel like it honors you when me or some other man will open a door for you?
Yeah, I feel personally, I think it's still an honoring thing. Like I look at it that way. Obviously, I tend to be an independent person, and I'm a woman who can get things done. But I feel like just because I can do it, sometimes maybe I don't need to do it. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes I feel like it should be, a little more honoring because, we men do it, they honor in certain ways, and then women honor in other ways. So we just have like our like roles that we kind of play a little bit, and it kind of meets each other's needs and honors each other in different ways. So to me personally, I definitely see like there'll be people who hold open doors and say whatever to me. A man will if we're both walking into the building, if it's somebody that even a stranger, a lot of times they'll be go ahead, you go ahead first, whatever. And I definitely see that still happening, definitely in our area, and it never offends me personally, but.
You never feel like that person is saying you're incapable of doing it for yourself or anything
No,
like that?
I never think of it that way at all.
So to you, moving on to the next question, to you would say then that this ladies first attitude has been largely or totally positive for you.
In my experience, it has been, and just the way I receive it, I guess it's not a negative to me. To me, it's somebody being, again, thinking of someone else beside themselves first. In that situation, it happens to be because I'm a female, but sometimes even in other kindnesses, just showing, selflessness, is always a positive in my opinion.
So the next question they ask, I think, is very perceptive. And that is, so when you talk about honor and people honoring one another and doing that, another thing that I think of is if I'm coming up to a door, even if it's not a woman, if it's a man that is older than me, I will tend to, just out of respect for my elder, to open the door for that man. And that is kind of an honoring thing. So here's maybe a difficult or interesting question. Do you think that the concept of honor is not as valued today as maybe it was in the past? Like, do you think that some of these things are kind of old-fashioned, that in the modern world might be fading away?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean,
now, granted, where we live in the southern part of the United States, and we're more traditional, I think.
Mm-hmm. I don't really know what it's like in other parts of the country. So, I mean, when you hear stories, you hear like it's not as important and not as prevalent, but I don't know. I don't know how to see that for myself, so I'm not sure.
Do you think, the last question that they have here on this subject is, do you think that it's in society's best interest to uphold values embodied in things like ladies first, like honor and sacrifice? Do you think it makes our society better when we teach young boys ladies first or things like that? Do you think that makes society better?
I think so, personally, just because I feel like if you have things like that are taught, then there is a right way to behave and a wrong way to behave. It sets boundaries, and I feel like just in society as a general, we tend to, left to our own devices, become more and more selfish and more, mean and just impatient and just all those things. So when you have certain things just ingrained in you to do, it makes you stop and, again, put the emphasis on someone else for a second. And so it kind of pulls you out of that selfishness a little bit. So on a whole, I feel like that's always a better mindset.
So this gives us some things to think about. So in your life and in your culture, many of you are watching in countries that are not the United States. How do you feel about this? About the concept of honoring, putting others before ourselves, and even in a gendered way of saying ladies first, doing things like this. It also used to be, not just in our country, I think worldwide, I think there used to be an idea of, and I think there still is largely, if there's a catastrophe, that the ladies and the children are evacuated first. Or it used to be when a ship was sinking, that the women and the children got on the lifeboats first. And this culture of honor, I think sometimes in the modern society, where the secular world wants to show how there's no differences between men and women, between male and female, and between the roles of masculine and feminine. I think sometimes the attitude is, well, since there's no difference between men and women, we don't need these, what the world might see as outdated modalities or outdated ideas. For those of us that are religious, and those of us like our family that comes from a more traditional standpoint, I don't think we see it that way. I think we continue to instill within us a culture of honor. And it's not always in a gendered way. Whenever our family is at a restaurant, something that was instilled in us as young boys, me and my brothers, and something that my parents have now instilled in their grandchildren, is that when McKeowns are at a restaurant, when we're done eating, we tend to stack our dishes and, put any trash or garbage or stuff, discarded napkins and things like this in a little pile to make it easier on the person that needs to come along and clear off the table. That we want to make their job a bit easier by cleaning up a bit of our mess before they have to come and do it. Just as a culture of honor and not wanting to leave a big mess for someone to clean up. It's something for you to think about in your life. How can we honor one another? Not just in our families, but even complete strangers. If you are on a busy street in your vehicle, do you let that person come out in front of you in their vehicle? Do you let someone pass, or do you let a pedestrian crossing the street go before you? Little things that we can do to honor one another. I think it's something good for us to think about. So I think this is a wonderful first experience with this JPS Rashi discussion Torah commentary. This is a wonderful resource, and I even think this would be good for any of you that lead a small group in your congregation, whether in a synagogue or a church, a messianic congregation, a Sunday school class. It's a really easy way to go through the Torah portions and have some good discussion questions. So maybe this is a resource that you would like to get. I think it's a wonderful thing for us to do here on the Rashi Nosh. So let's see how this goes for a bit. I think it's a positive thing. Thank you once again for joining us. And my prayer for us and our family and for you is that we begin to honor one another the way that Abraham honored his wife, and that also we would look back at our own family history and remember where it is that we came from. If we came from another country to where we are now, what was it about this place that we were really looking as this is a golden country? And if you're in a particular country and you think, wow, I don't know that our country is a very golden country anymore, maybe instilling some of this culture of honor would maybe bring back some of those ideas of that, as we say in our country, a shining city on a hill, which of course is a reference to scripture, to Jerusalem. Something for us all to think about. Thank you once again for joining us on the Rashi Nosh, and we pray that your family would be blessed as you go through the Torah together. An early Shabbat Shalom to all of you, and Kol Tuv, all the best to you and yours.